FX Medicine Live will be at Tammy Guest's Naturapreneur Experience from the 16th to the 17th of February 2019. For more information and to book your tickets, please go to tammyguest.com. This is FX Medicine. I'm Andrew Whitfield Cook. Joining us on the line today is Robbie Clark. Robbie's a Sydney-based dietitian and sports nutritionist who graduated with a Bachelor of Exercise Science and Nutrition from Southern Cross University and a Master's in Nutrition and Dietetics from the University of Canberra. He currently works as a practitioner in private practice in an integrative health clinic in Sydney's Northern Beaches, but has a widespread client base throughout Sydney. Robbie is the co-founder, director and dietitian at thehealthclinic.com.au, an integrative online health clinic which provides nutritional prevention, treatment and consultations for clients. Welcome to FX Medicine, Robbie. How are you?
Thanks for having me, Andrew. I'm very well, thanks.
Now, Robbie, we touched on a very topical point at the Bioceuticals Symposium in 2018, and that was electronic medical records and how do you protect the information of those. Yes. But I think firstly, I'd like to get a little bit about your history. Can we go back and delve into your history and how you first began to think of security and protection of information?
Sure. So I'm a functional dietitian who's currently still working in private practice. And I think as practitioners, we are always, whether it be consciously or subconsciously, thinking about the sensitive data that we handle on a daily basis. However, when you work in a clinic as a sole trader, you tend to become more complacent because the onus is more on the clinic to protect all the data of all the patients who are coming through that door. So therefore, you don't really think about the database and how it's being protected. So I've worked in private practice over 8 years, and most of those years were in a multidisciplinary medical and health and wellbeing clinic. But prior to that, I had done some placements in hospitals where protection of medical data is absolutely drilled into you. Yes, and it's the first thing they, basically before they put you on probation, they're telling you all about the importance of securing the data within the hospital facility. So I was quite shocked and surprised when I started working in a clinic and how relaxed they were about the patient data. There were no guidelines given to me by the practice manager. And because we weren't paperless back in those early years, any practitioner could have taken those patient notes home. So I guess that's when you could say that when I started thinking about security and the protection of patient information. That's
a massive sort of issue, isn't it? Like I can still remember even getting into trouble for actually protecting patient information because a certain health practitioner wanted an update on that patient's status, and I wouldn't give it to him, referring him to the night supervisor, and I got dragged over the coals for it.
Right.
But it's very interesting that you're absolutely right. Like patient information in a hospital setting is so much more protected to the point where nowadays even patient records are very often not kept at the end of the bed like they used to be in the olden days.
Absolutely. And I guess the addition to that is also that everything nowadays is going electronic, which is thought to make things easier for business, which it is. Hence why more and more clinics are going paperless. However, a big subject that has caught the eye of the health and the medical world is the creation, storage and transmission of electronic medical records. And, I guess for your listeners out there who might be a bit unsure as to what that definition actually means, it's an electronic version of a patient's medical history that is maintained by the provider or practitioner over time. And it may include things of administrative clinical data that is relevant to the person's care under a particular practitioner. And these might be things such as demographics, contact information, medical notes, medications, past medical history, pathology data and radiology reports. The list goes on.
Has there been any demonstrated instances of data stealing or infiltration in the health sector? Like I've heard of, and we're all very aware, this is in 2018, of the Facebook saga just recently happening.
Yes.
But what about the health sector? Or indeed, what about in particular the integrative health sector?
Yeah, well, this is very interesting because I don't know if you recall reading, but it was quite heavily in the media that earlier this year there was a flaw in Telstra's medical software, which is called Argus, and it's used by more than 40,000 providers, including hospitals, GPs, specialists, and also primary health networks and allied health providers. Basically, it was a flaw in the electronic messaging services software, which could have left Australians' health information very vulnerable to cyber attack.
Wow.
So essentially what Argus did is that they created a separate username and a static default password for computers, which were installed with remote desktop access. And this is essentially what allowed hackers to penetrate the system. And they had access to computers, but had not only stolen medical records, they instead used the system to carry out other illegal activities. So luckily, no information was given, but it could have been quite easily.
Okay, but why steal somebody's medical data? Surely financial data is going to be more worthwhile to a hacker.
Yeah, well, if you think nowadays more about identity theft, it's a huge thing, and it's the hardest thing to prove legally.
Right.
So this is why nowadays medical data is actually the number one sought after information online or over the internet over financial data.
So let's go back to what happened and what changed with you. What lessons did you learn that you can educate our listeners about?
Yeah, so essentially being in private practice, or I was seeing clients one-on-one. I also had a lot of clients who moved in regionally, and therefore I wanted to still consult with them. So just like any other practitioner out there, I started using Skype as the best means of being able to reach out to them. However, what I learned in my process and my journey is that Skype was absolutely not a secure way of consulting or transmitting medical information. And the reason for that is that many platforms are proprietary, meaning that healthcare providers have no way to determine if and where and what information is stored. Users can't reliably develop and verify an audit trail, which is very important for practitioners, as you would know, if they get pulled up. And also, there is no reliable way to verify the transmission of security, and there's no way to know when a breach or information occurs, or a breach of information.
Yeah.
So it's frightening.
So it's not just protection of patient information. It really is protecting your own butt from a legal standpoint.
100%.
Like this is huge. Because you've got no recourse of action. So what would happen? Let's say somebody was using, and we've set the example, and it's very common, as an online platform. We've used the example of Skype. Let's say somebody did use Skype.
Yes.
What would happen, or what might happen, and what would be the recourse of action if somebody was audited? What would you do?
Well, that's exactly right. Unless they're, because, in the text box in Skype, and you can attach documents. So if you're having a consult and your patient or client says to you, oh, yes, I've just had some pathology done, I'll send it to you straight away. And so rather than going via email, you have then sent it via Skype attachment. Now, if the patient gives consent, that's okay. But if the practitioner is not either saving that data or uploading it somewhere else, then there's absolutely no way that they can have a trail of that, that has been transmitted, because Skype does not allow for that. Even though it keeps your conversation, there is no legal standing for that conversation to be held in court.
And of course, we're not singling out Skype. So there's Skype, Zoom, GoToMeeting. There's heaps. There's heaps of these online platforms. Because they're a proprietary product, the information that you put onto them is theirs, not yours.
That's exactly right.
Right. So what was your first reaction when you first learnt this?
Well, I was quite...
I could imagine blood draining from face, white, pallid, shaky.
And it's the same reaction I get with all other practitioners I talk to who say, I'm online. My first question is, well, how are you consulting online? And it is usually Skype. So my reaction was exactly the same as how most would, hearing that information for the first time. So I was quite scared because I knew that if I was audited by my governing body, then I would not be covered. But also the amount of insurance that you require. So practitioners are really well versed in what protection they require in a physical sense. So professional indemnity and public liability, but they don't even think about cyber liability if they take their practice online.
So you have to basically search this as a separate item to insure yourself by. It's not automatically covered. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So if you do get hacked, and there are hackers out there...
Yeah, you've left yourself wide open.
That's exactly right. And they can hold your data to ransom, and they might ask for a certain sum for that data to be returned. And you may not be covered, or you may not have the money to be able to get that back.
So is this what happened with Argus, that they had the ransomware? Was that what happened?
Yes, that's exactly right.
Gotcha. I remember this.
Yeah.
So, okay, so what was your reaction? Like, what did you do? What steps did you take to remedy this?
Yeah, well, I guess the first step I took, particularly when developing my new platform, I really wanted to know, okay, well, what is it that I have to do in order to make my patient data most secure, but also because it's a platform that we can license to practitioners, it's then a matter of how do we make that data secure as well. So my first steps were literally a lot of meetings with web developers, cybersecurity experts, and also insurance companies. So it's a lot if you think about it. It's not just, okay, what program is best to use for me to be most secure? It's like, okay, how is it that I'm covered, and what is the most secure and encrypted programs I can be using, and how do we implement this? So
you've really gone to the nth degree to protect, like to ensure that you've got a protected product, dare I say the word watertight product. Like you involve security experts, and did they advise you had to, no, hackers commonly use this pathway, so don't use that.
Definitely.
The old adage is the back door, that sort of thing.
Well, if you think about it, like, because we're online, and if even in the medical sense, it is almost a form, if the information is hacked or breached, it is almost a form of malpractice.
Yeah.
So then you have to think about policies in place for malpractice insurance as well. So again, I had no idea of these type of definitions, but, and how they would be linked to an online product, but there it is.
So I would imagine, obviously the first time you bring out a product, nothing's perfect. You always evolve something. So you must have had some bugs, some missteps, and certainly a steep learning curve. That must have been so costly.
It was. It still is. I guess what I tell people, and as practitioners, we're very, very good at treating people and formulating treatment protocols, and we're all very well researched. However, when it comes to business, some of us might fail a little bit. So as long as you've got things in place at the beginning of your journey to the online world, it's really going to save you a lot of pain and discomfort down the path. So things like budgeting, financial planning is an absolute must for anyone thinking about starting a business or even just going online. And that also includes a business plan. And that will really help you put the pavement down for the way that you want to travel.
Yeah, but I just think it's a really often overlooked, in fact, I would say ubiquitously overlooked issue when we're talking about protecting patient information, the medical records. If somebody gets cyber hacked and if they haven't got adequate protection in place, then they may be opening themselves up to not just litigation from the patient for stealing their information, but indeed from law and also from their regulatory bodies for not protecting that information in an appropriate way. So you can be attacked on three sides.
Correct. And, if you think about it, Australia compared to, say, the US is still quite far behind of the telemedicine or telehealth platform. So a lot of the governing bodies, regulatory bodies, might be a bit more archaic in their, the way that they want their practitioners to practice. So you can imagine the lashback we've got from different people being a disruptor, if you will, in the industry. But it's funny. People go online because it expands their clientele, it expands their business, and they're able to get a bigger income.
Yeah.
However, they're not telling their regulatory body because they're frightened of prosecution.
Yeah. So,
they are just doing it discreetly, but probably not the safest way.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing about, our modern day convenient lifestyle where we're trying to access practitioners that have the best capability for us, and they may not be centrally located or conveniently located geographically to us. So particularly in the medical world, there are a lot of restrictions around online business and things like that. But the fact of the matter is that we are moving towards the future. We've even got robots that operate remotely. So it's, it's kind of like you don't tell me that this sort of thing isn't going to come and that we can't change towards it. The fact of the matter is we have to. It's just when. Yeah,
absolutely. I don't know if you've seen just recently, there was information put out about Google Administrator. It is literally a administration software that can book appointments for you, whether it be online or calling up a place of business to book an appointment. So all you need to tell Google is the date, the time, the actual service that you require, and it will do it all on your behalf. So yes, things are changing in the IT world.
Okay, so what about security of those sorts of, high-end platforms?
Whenever I'm specifically talking about, or to practitioners, about the security of details, there are three major components that one should be looking at, and that is technical safeguards, physical safeguards, and also administrative safeguards. So they're essentially the three pillars of safety of what I kind of present on when I am talking about this topic. So technical safeguards are basically techniques to prevent or even limit access to an electronic resource. And then you've got the physical safeguards are more about techniques that prevent or limit physical access to resources and data. So, for example, people listening in on a conversation that you might be having in a consultation room, people peering over your shoulder, looking at your computer screen and looking at patient data, for example. And then the administrative safeguards are more about a combination of both technical and also physical. But, for example, in a clinic, you might be looking at certain policies or procedures and practices that are implemented within that clinic to secure that data of patients.
It's really interesting you say physical, because we don't often think of this. But, as you say, people looking over your shoulder, seemingly well-meaning. But, I can still remember as a nurse, colleagues getting a dressing down basically for mentioning private information at a cafeteria in their break. And what they didn't realise is that this was a very small country town and everybody knew everybody. So even to the point of not mentioning, patient stories on your break within the establishment, even there, it was, hey guys, we really need to hush this down. It was really interesting.
Well, that breaches confidentiality, doesn't it?
That's exactly right.
that's a part of our core of practitioners, of what we have to abide by, and almost like take an oath about confidentially keeping information stored to ourselves, unless there is patient consent. So, as you say, it goes back to workstation security, which we don't think of very often.
So, the other point I was thinking of is soundproofing. Let's say there's a multidisciplinary clinic, and you've got 1, 2, 3 massages, maybe a naturopathic consultation, a medical consultation going on. If you can hear that information transmitting between the walls, that might transgress this patient confidentiality.
Correct. And interestingly there, if you can, say, either record or have a transcript of a meeting that takes place between the practitioner and the practice management, discussing your concerns around that, then the pressure is taken off you quite heavily.
Wow.
Because you've addressed that with management and said, I think the walls are a bit thin, or I'm thinking people can hear me. And if there are any breaches, well, then at least you've got that to go back on.
Well, look, I've even done it, where it's, I've even seen totally inappropriate practice, but even to the point of where there are cubicles and you can overhear the conversation in the next cubicle. So let's talk about hospital ED departments. Emergency departments. So, casualty. There's an issue that might raise its head.
I think in those situations there are limitations, but then there are also allowances in the fact that because it is a very high energetic area that you're just working on the go frequently, there are abilities for you to be able to talk openly, particularly because you usually have so many specialists, intensivists and, doctors in the same room at the same time.
Yeah. So where can practitioners find out more about cybersecurity, how to appropriately look after medical records electronically? Yeah,
well, look, I think I might too. I'll be happily to give some pointers as to probably the questions that they should be asking themselves in order to make sure that they've got the most secure practice as possible going online. So firstly, I tell my practitioners to say, well, look at what your insurance policy covers. Does it cover the cyber liability insurance? And then I'd also make sure that they're installing and enabling encryption software on all devices that you use to consult. So whether it be desktop, tablet, smartphone, or even Android. Use multiple passwords. This is the biggest thing. Or any other type of user authentication process. I use a program which is a password generator program. Yep. It's called 1Password, and that's with a number 1. And essentially, you can generate really long, difficult passwords for hackers to get into. And it basically stores all your passwords to the different sites that you might have an account with. So that has absolutely been a saviour because I have at least about 150 different passwords on that alone.
Okay, I've got to ask a question about this because I've been reticent to do this. A mate of mine told me about it and I've been like, well, hang on. You've got this multiple password generator, but you've got one account to log into that multiple password generator.
Yes.
So have you got one access point to a multitude of passwords by doing that?
That is correct.
Right.
Yes.
So it's still a bottleneck. It's still this...
It is. Well, if you forget that password, that can be quite challenging.
Choose from 150.
Yes, but that's a common occurrence and an everyday occurrence with a lot of people that I speak to anyway.
So that would be would it be a 2-step recovery process then to thwart cybersecurity? Right. Yeah, not a 1-step. Yeah. And listeners, by what I mean here is they'd have an email and a mobile number so that it's vastly less likely that they've stolen 2 things more than one.
Exactly right. Yeah. And look, I would also probably encourage to install and enable security software to protect them against malicious applications, viruses, spyware and malware that we were basically talking about earlier. Updating security software is very important on computer. People let it lapse or people don't update it. So they need to be aware of that as well. And also, Absolutely. Maintain physical control of all your devices. So whether it be your laptops, if that's what you use, your mobile devices, because if you have any information stored on that and you're sharing it publicly, then obviously it can be accessed at any time. So that can be quite dangerous. So in answering your last question, basically, if people want to know more, they can certainly go onto my website to see what type of platform that I have produced for practitioners, and that's www.healthbank.io. And currently we're taking expressions of interest from practitioners who either want to expand their practice online. As I said, we're in the beta testing phase at the moment. So if they're interested about the product, they can certainly provide their email address.
I have to ask, IO?
Yes.
What?
So
You're not based there. You're not based. I'm not calling you that long distance.
It's basically going down the path of, Internet of Things, or the IoT world.
Right.
And being a online business, I guess we're trying to capture that whole innovative market because it really is the way of the future. So that's why we've definitely gone with the IO. And not to mention .com was taken.
Right. Okay. Gotcha. Robbie, thank you so much. This is very interesting stuff. I mean, thought-provoking nonetheless, worrisome, really more practically, that we really we're not even aware that this is an issue, let alone worrying about it. So thanks for enlightening us. I'll certainly be taking extra steps with that data or those data that comes my way. And I'm not storing electronically yet, but I just think it's a really pertinent issue with the future as we move online with more and more things. Yeah. Thank you so much.
And it's unstoppable too, really. It's going to head that way.
It is. There is no question that we're heading that way. So this is really ahead of the game. Thank you so much for joining us on FX Medicine.
Thanks for having me.
This is FX Medicine. I'm Andrew Whitfield Cook. If you enjoyed today's podcast, you can find more Industry Insights podcasts and resources under the Community tab on the FX Medicine website.
What if you could hang out in an epic location with an awesome, like-minded practitioner tribe, having extraordinary experiences with a community of leaders, innovators and visionaries, all sharing their wisdom to move our profession forward? It all starts with the Naturpreneur Experience, a professional development conference like no other for naturopaths, nutritionists, herbalists and practitioners. Check out NatX 2019 at tammyguest.com for more details.